A bubble occurs when asset prices rise far higher than the underlying fundamentals. They're often caused by overly optimistic projections about the future, and they generally create click-worthy headlines. Because of this, they're often in the media, and you could arguably say we're in the everything bubble. But this story is not about the everything bubble, it's about a different bubble. It's not Bitcoin, it's not GameStop, it's the emu. Yes, this humble three-toed, flightless bird from Australia is really no different to the Dutch tulip mania of the 1600s. In this video, we'll go through the 5 steps of a bubble, from displacement, boom, euphoria, profit taking, right through to full-blown panic. The emu has a humble story, so it's strange how it ended up as part of one of these market bubbles. It's native to Australia and the second largest bird after the ostrich. Long been a source of mythical inspiration, the bird actually claims a place on Australia's coat of arms, stamps, and 50-cent coin. It has even sparked a military deployment, the Great Emu War of 1932, when soldiers were sent to Western Australia to kill them, and thereby save the farmers' crops. The emu's won, for there is more to this bird than being a flightless oddity. Although that was one of the reasons it became popular, the prized possession featured heavily in zoos worldwide. And this brings us to the first stage of the bubble, displacement. Displacement generally occurs when investors get excited about a new paradigm, and in this case, it was the demise of red meat. You see, during the 1980s, people were looking for a healthier version of beef, and it was in this guise, as livestock, that the emu packed its bags, it can't fly, and set off for greener pastures. First off, in Texas. And so starts the small foundations of our bubble. People started to get a little bit excited about the emu, and ads started to appear in papers. All of a sudden, there was far more to emus than just steaks. They also provided oil for lotions, skin for leather, feathers for clothes, and these enormous emerald eggs for 4-person omelets. You could even paint the eggs. Best of all, for farmers, emus provided you with more emus. And so we enter the second phase, the boom. During the boom phase, the price of a breeding pair of emus rose from just $200 in the 1980s to $28,000 by 1993. Now, during the boom phase, prices generally rise slowly at first, and then gain momentum as more and more participants enter the market. This sets the seed for the boom phase, and during this phase, the asset in question attracts widespread media coverage. This leads to FOMO, the fear of missing out on what could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and this spurs more speculation, drawing an increasing number of investors and traders into the fold. But what other attributes could these wonderful birds offer? Well, they actually need less land to graze than cows. They're actually quieter as well, except during the breeding season when the females make this booming noise and the males grunt. So times are booming for the emus, and the promise of a new, healthier beef is just around the corner. It's going to feature on every restaurant in the country. More and more people want to get into the business. In fact, so many people want to get into the business that some forward-thinking emu owners had to buy expensive equipment to microchip their flocks because emu rustling was becoming such a problem as the value rose. So did emu fraud. Some retirees and speculators put their savings into emus that were sold to them but never delivered. And so we enter the third phase, euphoria. During this phase, caution is thrown to the wind as asset prices skyrocket. You remember what I said about the breeding pair? Well, those prices just doubled again. Valuations have reached extreme levels, and the greater fool theory is in play. The idea that no matter how high prices go, there will always be a market of buyers willing to pay more. Now, by this stage in the story, some practical realities are hitting home. You see, emus are not that easy to rear. They're as tall as human beings, growing up to 6 foot 2 inches, and weigh around 120 pounds. They can sprint up to 30 miles an hour, and they can also kick. The supply of emus continue to increase. Emus lay 5 to 15 eggs in a clutch and can keep doing so for more than 16 years. They have around 12 surviving chicks a year and a single breeding pair can spawn 133 breeding pairs within 5 years, and nearly 36,000 within 10 years. So obviously, the population was booming. So we enter the fourth stage of the bubble, profit taking. In this stage, the smart money starts heading for the exit. There are warning signs flashing everywhere that this bubble is about to burst. You see, it turns out that consumers are pretty hard to win over. Emu meat was supposed to be lower in cholesterol and fat and higher in iron than beef, but as it turned out, it's more expensive and less familiar. Along with the specialized fencing and feed all the way through to the distribution and supply chain, quality control was becoming an issue. And so we enter the last and final stage of this bubble, the panic. It really only takes a small event to prick a bubble, but once it's popped, the bubble cannot inflate again. In the panic stage, the asset price reverses course and descend as rapidly as they had ascended. Investors and speculators faced with all sorts of problems as the supply of emus absolutely overwhelms demand. Asset prices slide quickly. By 1998, emus were worthless. Instead of even paying to keep feeding them, many owners just abandoned them. Some farmers cut their fences, hoping the emus would leave and become someone else's problems. As a result, there are actually some mobs of feral emus in parts of Texas, perhaps survivors and their descendants. Occasionally they show up in small towns or nearly cause crashes as they cross country roads.
I try to cut it off at the pass. The bird just looks straight at me as I get out and just runs on down the road again.
Of course, animal control officers and police struggle to catch them because they're so tall and fast, and when they do, they have no way to transport them because they're so tall they don't fit into the dog kennels. Now, this is not, of course, the first or last bubble that will ever exist in these markets, and the humble emu has popped up in all sorts of other places, including recently in India, who suffered from their own emu market bubble. Now, these speculative bubbles can theoretically arise over anything, from cryptocurrencies all the way through to stocks, shares, and housing. But this is another cautionary tale. When supply gets ahead of demand, things can go south very quickly.